So today, as we keep on just listening to what the Spirit of God's doing, we've been talking about reconciliation, and we've been talking about invitation. And these two questions come together in this story that is in the end of the Gospel of John, as Jesus and Peter again interact about fish.
John 21:1. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon, Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "Well, come too," they all said. So they went out into the boat, but they caught nothing at all that night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some." So they did. And they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciples Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water, and headed to shore. The others stayed in the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were not only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. "Bring some of the fish you caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't torn. "Now come and have some breakfast," Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. A third time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." Amen.
So, odd fact. Peter is out on the boat, and he puts his clothes on to jump into the water. Doesn't it usually happen the other way around? We're sort of like, I should have less clothes if we're going to dive into the water, but I don't know, maybe if you meet Jesus like that, it has that kind of impact on you, where you're not quite thinking straight. I would think so, So, odd fact, not really central to what's happening here this morning, I don't think. So here's Peter. And Peter has been following Jesus for 3 years. This account happens after Jesus has been raised from the dead. And so you catch the significance of what's happened, that Jesus has been leading Peter and James and John and the other disciples, and he's been through them been ministering to crowds, and there's quite this following coming, and people are saying, "This is the Messiah that we have been expecting. This is the person who's going to come and liberate us from Rome." And Peter is getting ready to be the general that's at the front of that revolution that's bringing that all about. And then the moment of confrontation arrives, and they're in the garden in the thick of night, and Peter grabs his sword, and it's like, here it is, my chance to go down in the annals of Israeli history, and he takes a big swipe, and maybe a little bit of a bad name, because he'd been, not not really practicing sword fighting that much, you know. And the guy that he's going for ducks, and he just catches the ear. And Jesus is like, "What are you doing, Peter?" It's like, well, I thought that's where we were going here. I thought this was the moment that we're going to have this violent confrontation, and that we're going to put ourselves in charge, and we're going to make people answer to us, and that we're going to have this, you know, we're just going to institute the new way of doing things. And Jesus is like, "No, Peter, put the sword away. My kingdom works on the basis of invitation, not of coercion." Then Jesus goes off onto, he's captured and taken away onto a trial, and Peter lurks in the background. There's this little servant girl that says, "I saw you with Jesus." And Peter's like, no, not me. It just freaks him out. His fear comes over him, and he denies Jesus these 3 times. And then Jesus dies. Can you imagine how devastated Peter feels at this point? It's like his last interaction with Jesus was Jesus, after the Bible says that after Peter did deny Jesus, that Jesus turned and looked at him. Like Jesus knew what was going on. Can you imagine that? Like you're there with Jesus, you're saying just a few hours before you had said, "Jesus, you can't wash my feet because I'm not worthy of it." Jesus says, "No, I have to wash your feet." And that's like, "Okay, well then just give me a whole bath and you know, because I want to be all in with you." And then the very next page, you know, he's like backing up and retreating, and just this very, I don't know. I'm the only one like that, right? I can just be this bold and on fire, and we're going to get it right from here on out. But the next time, it's like, man, I really blew that. I just really backed up in fear. I just really was like absorbed in my own self. And I just really realized that I really wasn't following as a disciple of Jesus. Whether I wasn't hearing his voice, or whether I was ignoring it or rationalizing it, putting my intellect in front of it, instructing God that can possibly be what he means. We've got a bucket full of tricks that we pull out in those kinds of situations, right? And so here's Peter then, who's like a dashed dream. I thought it was going to be something, and it's not. And so he kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, "I'm going back to fishing." Well, yeah, he knew that Jesus had risen, so he knew that there was something going on. But it's like, but see, Jesus, he had just denied Jesus. He had messed up. So obviously he had disqualified himself. So certainly when Jesus, now in this resurrected form, went out to do whatever he was going to do, he'd certainly look for a new group of disciples, right? Because the previous 12 had all sort of turned tail and ran. So they had obviously disqualified themselves. And so they weren't. So here's Jesus appearing on the shore as Peter says, "Well, I guess after all, I'm a fisherman." He's still a person of influence because there's other disciples too that come with him, and not all of them had been fishermen, I don't think. So he's still leading people there, and so he's got this big crowd in there, out in the boat, and they're catching fish. There's just one problem: the fish aren't biting that night, and so they're not going into the net or whatever. And so here he is, and then they're coming into shore early in the morning. And there's this man standing on the shore. And he calls out to them. This is the carpenter calling out to the fishermen, right? "You guys got any fish?" Like, "No, not a one." Jesus is like, "Put your net over on that side of the boat." Who's the fisherman? The guys that are in the boat, right? Oh well. So they put the net on the other side, and the fish are just swarming into the net. Fill with them. Later they count them as 153 large fish. Okay, and so they come in, and Peter's like, "It's Jesus. Only Jesus does that. Remember last week? beginning of the Gospel of Luke, at the start of ministry, Jesus had messed with Peter's net with fish before, you know. And so Jesus just wants to get into all of our stuff. Into every part of our business. Into all part of who we are. That when you go to work, you still represent Jesus in that context. And what you do with that work, you represent Jesus in that context. That you don't compartmentalize your life and say, well, that's this, and that's that, and that's that, and I'm a disciple in this part, and I'm a disciple in that part, but it's like, I am a disciple of Jesus. And Jesus is the one that's leading, and so how do I bring glory to him? How do I work in his way of reconciliation, that I'm honoring this Prince of Peace, and no matter what the situation is, that's the question that each of us answer. I'm not telling you that answer. You're hearing the Spirit of God give you that answer. And so here's Peter, and he's like, that's Jesus. And he puts his clothes on and dives into the water. And goes, and because, I don't know, somehow it's better to meet Jesus in wet clothes than without clothes. I don't know. Okay. So, I'm not sure why I'm fixating on this. Anyway, so they get to the shore, and here's Jesus. And what does Jesus have? Fish. Did Jesus, what's this deal with the fish? He just got them to get 153 of them. And he's got some fish and bread roasting on the fire. They do barbecue. And we're in good hands here, guys. So it's like, so Jesus had some fish, but not enough fish. What's that about? Like he couldn't produce enough fish to cook the full breakfast, and so he had to grab some more from what the disciples had caught? He couldn't? No, that's not what it is. I mean, he had just provided 153 to fly into a net. I'm sure he could have provided as many as he wanted for that. But it's just the way Jesus works, isn't it? He's a God of invitation. And he's always saying, will you join me with what I'm doing? I'm delighted to use you in this process of what I'm doing. Austin and I make this apple cobbler. We call it apple goodie. And so we cut up the apples, and then there's this really good topping that goes on it. It's oatmeal and flour and sugar, and it's really good. And then you put it in the oven and you bake it and it comes out. And so Austin and I would make this together, you know. And Austin's first job was to be the apple taster tester. You know? I'd sit there peeling the apple saying, here, Austin, here's this one. What do you think? Shall we include that one? Yeah, it's good, you know. It's like, well, it took a little bit longer to have his help in those days, you know. But you know what? Now it's like, he does this better than me. He makes those crumbs better than me. Because but I left him become part of it. And that's how Jesus does with us. Jesus says, I want you to be helping me with what I'm doing. Please bring the fish. Please come with what you have. I want to be using that in what I'm doing. Now, notice the disciples were respectful, though, of what Jesus was doing. And they allowed him to be the one that's hosting the breakfast. And it's not sort of like, well, here, you know, we've got 153 of them, Jesus, you know, if we need your help, we'll let you know. So it's not falling off on that side either. Catch what I'm saying here? Jesus is the one that's hosting this meal. Jesus is the one that is saying, come and be part of this with me. And so, but please, bring what you have and join in, because I'm delighted to be using you. That's how he works in this world. Jesus doesn't have to use us to be bringing about this reconciliation of his kingdom onto this earth. That's what he's after. That's what his mission is. But he calls us onto mission with him. And as we're on mission, he says, let's do it in the way that excites you. Let's do it in the way that brings the best out of the personality of what you are. And so it looks different because you're doing it than it does if what I'm doing it. Because that brings God glory. But we're doing it all anchored in the fact that this is God's mission. So we believe here at this church that because we are a body, that there's things that we're called to do collectively that we can't just do by saying, well, y'all just go out there and live for Jesus. Now, there is that aspect too. There is that part that as we go, because we're disciples all the time, that there's this place where we're listening to that individual call of God, but we're also listening to that call of God as His body. I'm not His body. We're His body, and I'm part of we, so I'm part of it. It's the body of Jesus that brings about the purposes of God, that join God, join the person of Jesus on mission. So Peter jumps into the water to be the first to be there with Jesus. Well, he didn't bring the fish along. He wasn't going after the breakfast. It was just, it's Jesus. He's alive. Sometimes we come because Jesus is going to do this miracle for us, Because Jesus is going to, because it's like if we do this, then, well, if I do this, then Jesus will make me healthy, wealthy, and wise, If we do this, then it's like, no. There's this person, not yet a part of our body, that I've been doing some texting and phone calls with, and he's just like, I'm finished. Because he wasn't getting what he wanted, And it's like, no. We don't follow Jesus because of what we get. We follow Jesus because it's Jesus. Because it's who He is. That His presence of being with Him, that He doesn't owe us anything. We already are indebted to Him for our lives, for what He's already done for us. And then Jesus says, so come. Well, let's just talk a little bit more about what this means. So for Peter, Jesus was there physically, and so he jumped into the water. So how do we come to Jesus just for the sake of Jesus? One thing I try to do to get in tune with Him is when I'm in the car is to tune out the radio and not use other playlists for music and things like that, but just to sit with Him. It's like, here, Jesus, here's what I'm thinking, what are you thinking? There's this time recently where I was trying to pray and, then this situation should be handled like this, right? And I was feeling all kinds of anxious about it and how I'd keep control of it and all these kinds of things. But then as I'm just trying to be before the Lord honors that, and He's like, Glenn, how about if we work on you instead? And just like, how about if what you hold accountability with me on is what you give input into that decision? What if I didn't want you to be the one who's the mastermind of all that area that you were concerned about? They would just want you to be concerned about the input and let Jesus be the one who directs the output. Let it be His kingdom. That we work with accountability on what God's calling me and what He's calling you to be doing and how He's calling us to be involved in the body. And we're not so much looking at that output side, but we know that we're stepping into these areas where He's calling us to be involved with Him. Where He's calling us to be involved in mission. Another thing that I do to just center myself before God is that I journal. And so a lot of these are just, I use a pen on real paper, and I journal. And so sometimes I'm talking to God. I might talk about experiences, all right, but then it turns into prayer, and I begin to catch what my heart's about as I write it down. It's also a way to keep me focused and to help me, because it's like, well, I should be productive with my time. So somehow, if I'm filling up a piece of paper, it makes me feel productive, And I don't know, I think it's kind of like, when I was 4 years old, my dad left me have paper and pen in church, So Jesus lets me use a journal so that I feel productive as I'm waiting before Him. Does that make sense? So that's like, here I am, God. I'm here in your presence. You take this of who I am and just use it in a way that brings glory to you. Let me be the one that helps you with the apple goodie that you're making, Jesus. Even if today I'm only your apple taster.
Yeah.
So Jesus says, another thing that we do here at church is we have spiritual discipline cohorts, prayer cohorts and things like that. Just ways that we're practicing disciplines that help us to be focusing on Jesus and you for who he is and who you are, and that comes into that. I think one reason why this is so much on my heart is because, we're gearing up for Vacation Bible School, and we're announcing these new plans, and so we're in this productive season, and Jesus is just saying, but can we remember the relationship?
Right.
Can we say, come and sit with me, dwell with me, be in my presence? I'm measuring, I love you. I want you to be loving me. I don't want you just to be out there doing all this stuff. I want you to be in my presence. I want to be interacting with you. I want to be experiencing those moments with you. And so Jesus says, come, my friends. Let's have breakfast. And remember what Peter's experiences had been. And Jesus said, come, all of you together, let's eat. It's really, 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 really hard to have Jesus exclude you. He just welcomes you to come. I think the tendency for me would have been to say, well, Jay, I want you, it's not personal, okay? You just happen to be there in that corner, so you don't think twice about that. So it's like, well, Jay, I'd like you to be at that breakfast. There's a few things that you and me got to get cleared up first, It's like, no. Let's belong to one another. Let's fellowship together. Let's eat together. Whatever happened hasn't separated the fact that we are in relationship. Jesus loved Peter. Jesus died for Peter. There's nothing that he could do that could separate him from that, as it says in Romans. But then, neither does it go unattended.
Yeah.
Neither is it just like, we'll never talk about that, It's like we'll just sort of keep that over there. But then proving his love. They're eating together, they're fellowshipping together, and then Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And sorry, a little bit of Greek here. Jesus is saying, Peter, do you have a self-sacrificing love for me that's unconditional? And Peter's like, we're good buds, dude. And Jesus is like, it's not quite my question. You could track this, you scholars, need the words. Jesus says, do you agape me? Peter says, I phileo you. Okay? So do you track? No, Jesus is saying. I'm asking, do you self-sacrificially just give yourself to me? And Peter's like, I like you. Respect you. But Jesus keeps pressing the point, but it doesn't say that Jesus is upset with Peter's answers. There's a whole lot more humility in Peter right now when he's not ready to respond into what Jesus is asking of him. He's suddenly not quick to say, yeah, this is who I am. Yeah, count me. We're like this. It's like this is. And then the third time when Peter gets upset with Jesus, when he's grieved, Jesus changes the word. Jesus is like, Peter, are we really buds? Are we really even friends? And it just lays Peter out. But Jesus, you know. You know, Jesus. You're the one who knows my heart. And that's where Jesus wants us this morning. to be in that trusting relationship with him where our hearts are laid open to Jesus and just saying, Jesus, you know my heart. How about if we work on you telling me my heart instead of me telling you my heart? Because if I tell you my heart, I'm going to get some sort of self-aggrandizement part of me. I'm going to cook the books. I'm going to pad the resume. I'm going to do something. It's just because I know I don't measure up to you. So Jesus, here I am. You just tell me about my heart. And Jesus saying, here's how you walk with me. You minister with me in this way. You feed my lambs. You feed my sheep. You take care of my people. You're part of who we are. You're part of this. Here we are this morning. Just this morning, will you trust Jesus with your heart? Will you trust Jesus to say, I know that whatever you see in me, that you'll not cast me out, but that you'll receive it unto yourself. You even receive all those broken, hateful things, and you receive them unto yourself on the cross, so that I don't have to carry them anymore. So that I don't have to live in the regret. So that I don't have to live in all those areas. So whatever those areas are, whatever those things are, you know, there's often these places where sometimes I think we stay busy for Jesus because there's certain parts of our lives that we're afraid to let him see. And we want to impress him with all the other areas, as though somehow we can tip the scales or something. That's not how it works. But Jesus just says, can I touch every part of your life? Because he who comes to me I won't cast out. And so whether it's the first time saying, I've never opened up my life, I've never asked Jesus for forgiveness of sins, we want you to have that encounter with Jesus today. But if you said, oh, I've done that a long time ago, that's not the end, you know. There's these areas, those things that are troubling in your life, those things where maybe you just are carrying regrets and you wish that this had happened differently, or you're carrying because you feel that God disappointed you in some way, because you had expectations in what he would do instead of just in who he is, and you just want to be telling him that and letting that rest with him. And so we're going to come back into worship this morning. This isn't just the wrap-up, guys. This is the time where Jesus is saying, will you come and have breakfast with me? Will you come and eat, where he's inviting all of us to just be coming and to be laying ourselves before him and to be experiencing that love and that acceptance and to be able to acknowledge whatever it is that those broken and embarrassing areas are, and just to hear Jesus saying, I won't cast you away. I've already died for that. I know. I'll take that. I'll receive that. And so as we worship, we'll have people that are here that are prepared to pray with you. Why do we do that? Because when you just pray by yourself, sometimes it lets open a way for the enemy to come back and to say, you thought that was significant, didn't you? But when you pray with the witness, when you publicly open your mouth and speak out those things, or when somebody's ministering into you, it establishes it, because the Bible says that when 2 or 3 gather together and agree on something, that there Jesus shines up in a way that he doesn't otherwise when it's just small.
Amen.
And so we're going to just allow the Spirit to be working in our lives as we worship. And there'll be people that'll be here that'll be ready to be praying with you. And I invite you to come and just to be praying with them with whatever the areas are that your mind has been going to, that you're just like, I just want to lay this before Jesus and let it there with him. I don't want to take it back to my seat. And then a little bit later, not yet, but a little bit later, we're going to share at this table of the Lord. I think it's just bread, not bread and fish this morning. But we're going to be invited to the table of the Lord. And won't you stand? Let's worship together.